Hi guys, it's Christine from Sparkle's Heavenly Creations. Welcome to part 1 of our Fabric Tumbler tutorial. Today we are going to base coat a tumbler and then move to apply fabric using e6000. Then we're going to learn how to trim our fabric from our tumbler, along with adding some extra bling with some glitter on the bottom and top of our tumbler. Now let's dive in. All right, so we are ready to start our universal white application. Today I'm using universal white pigmented with some purple to give us a base coat. This base coat is going to match the color of our fabric so that we have a nice cute bottom and top to go along with our glitter. Make sure that you are applying it in long strokes, allowing for dry time between 2 and 3 hours, and then continuing the application until completely streak free, usually about 2 to 4 coats. Now we're going to take our fabric and apply it with e6000. I'm using e6000 pump spray. I've also added it to a little squirt bottle so that I can apply it a little bit easier. I take a foam brush and apply it around the entire cup. I'm going to warn you that this is my first time doing a fabric tumbler with e6000. It is not the best, easiest glue to work with from a fabric tumbler perspective. So it took me quite a while to get it to stick, and I had to continually go back and forth and add additional e6000 as I moved and stretched my fabric around the tumbler. Be patient, it will get there and it will work. You just have to give it a little bit extra love. All right, now here is where we need to start working our glue where the seam is. So I am adding some additional e6000 glue on top of the seam. I'm going to be doing this about, about ½ inch on either side of the seam on both the top and the bottom of the cup. This will help us in future steps. After each application of e6000, you need to make sure that the glue is dried completely. It took me a while to understand the timing of this. It's going to be different for everyone depending on how much e6000 you actually used. So make sure that you check it after a few hours and see what it looks like. It ended up taking mine quite a long time. I was doing it every probably 6 to 8 hours for it to get really good and dry before moving on to my next steps. All right, so now we're going to go back to that seam. Again, that 1/2 inch on either side of the seam. We're going to apply some additional e6000 to the cup in those areas, both on the top layer and the bottom layer. Again, what we're trying to do is harden up that area so that we can give a nice clean cut of the seam prior to moving forward. All right, so after it's been dry, we can come back and again apply e6000 to that same seam location to harden that up for our next step, which will be to cut the seam in a nice straight line. All right, after your E6000 is sufficiently dry, we are coming back to begin the trimming process. Here, I'm just taking scissors to trim the top and the bottom just to give us a little bit more room. Now we're going to locate the seam of the tumbler where both of the fabrics are overlapping. We want to take a piece of painter's tape and apply that about a 1/2 inch over that overlap. Then, once we get that nice and straight and lined up, we're going to take an X-Acto blade and start cutting down that line. We want to make sure that we're cutting through both the top and the bottom overlapped fabric. It took me a couple times to get through it. Just make sure that you go back and forth after you remove the tape and start pulling it apart. If your fabric is giving you a hard time, again, just continue to go through with your X-Acto blade until you get it completely cut straight and neat. Now that it's up, we're going to pull up both sides of the fabric, and now we need to remove the bottom layer of the fabric. So I'm just going through with the X-Acto blade on that exact cut line and removing off that piece of fabric as well. Once that's removed off, both of the lines or the seam of the tumbler should match up perfectly. So now we're going to grab our E6000 and apply that to that area and make sure that we get that seam nice and lined up and absolutely flawless. We then continue to go around the tumbler and just give another coat of E6000 on top of the entire thing. And once that's completed, again, make sure that you dry it sufficiently. It took me a good 6 to 8 hours between each coat. So just keep that in mind as you continue to watch the drying time for your E6000. All right, so here we are getting ready to apply another coat of E6000. Again, apply that E6000 with your foam brush. Get all the way around, including the top and bottoms, so that when we're ready to come and trim that up, it's nice and hard so that we can get a nice, clean, crisp trim line. All right, so one last coat of E6000 before we go through and trim it up. So again, applying our E6000 with our foam brush, continually going around the cup until it's thoroughly covered, making sure that we get both the top and the bottom. Now it's time to trim the top and bottom of our tumbler. I am using a tumbler trimming tool. I basically put my tumbler upside down against the bottom of this tool, and I push hard against the blade to try and cut it in a straight line all around the tumbler. I did have a hard time in a few spots, so I did want to make sure that I continue to go through there and get that nice and cut before pulling it off. We definitely don't want any frayed edges. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom, Again, pushing hard against the cup to get that nice, flat, straight line cut out. I did have a few issues, again, due to the fabric not being extremely solid from the e6000, but at the end of the day, I got it done with the use of the blades, and I did take the scissors for one part of it as well to help get that nice and even. All right, here we go. The last and final coat of e6000. We're just going to apply that around the cup for one last time. Then we will be ready to apply our bright tone. All right, after we've sufficiently let that e6000 dry, we're coming back in and doing a coat of bright tone. So we're going to apply a thin coat of bright tone around the entire tumbler, making sure to get both the top and bottoms of the tumbler. Then we're going to go ahead and apply our glitter directly to the tumbler. So we're sprinkling on both at the bottom and the top where the purple meets the edge of the fabric. I also just do a tad bit above that line just because I like a little bit of sort of ombre into that fabric. You can do however you want. If you want a straight line, feel free to do that as well. This is just my personal preference. Now I'm going to take the tumbler off, get the bottom nice and well, and then put it back on the tumbler and have that spin for an hour. So now we're ready to apply a second coat of glitter. We're going to use e6000 this time. I'm going to use a foam brush to apply the e6000 to the top and bottom of the tumbler. Now we can apply some glitter. I did do the top first and then went with the e6000 to the bottom. After about 15-20 minutes, when it's dry, we're ready to smush the glitter. I take my parchment or wax paper, roll it around the cup, and smush the glitter in as hard as I can to squeeze out any extra air bubbles between the glitter and the tumbler. All right, so now we're just going to apply another coat of e6000 to the glitter on both the bottom and the top of the cup. Now, after the E6000 is dry, we're coming back to Smush for one last time. We're taking our parchment paper or wax paper and smushing the glitter around the tumbler. We're then going to apply one final coat of E6000 to seal everything up really well before we go ahead and start applying our layers of bright tone. All right, that's it for part 1. Now we're ready for bright tone. Stay tuned for part 2. It's coming really soon. Thanks again so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, and feel free to share this video with others.